August 10th, 258 AD. An iron griddle, superheated over smoldering coals, lay ready in the heart of Rome, a stark, brutal altar for a man whose only crime was devotion and the guardianship of a sacred trust. The air, thick with the acrid scent of charcoal and the faint metallic tang of fear, pressed down upon a crowd that had gathered not for a festival or a triumph, but for an execution designed to break the spirit of an entire movement. Lawrence, a deacon of the Christian church in Rome, still young, perhaps in his early 30s, was brought forth. His composure, often described as an unsettling calm, defied the palpable terror radiating from the instruments of his impending torment, instruments engineered for slow, agonizing dissolution, rather than swift, merciful death. He was to be roasted alive, his flesh yielding gradually to the intense, unyielding heat, a spectacle intended to instill abject obedience through the raw, unadulterated display of state power. This was not a swift, clean decapitation, nor a quick garroting. This was a deliberate, drawn-out process of incineration, a public vivisection of the human form, an ordeal from which escape was impossible, and the final moments, reportedly, were spent in full, terrible consciousness. To witness such a spectacle was to confront the depths of state-sanctioned cruelty, a chilling testament to how far an empire would go to suppress what it perceived as a dangerous, burgeoning threat, reducing a man to a mere example, a gruesome deterrent, a chilling pronouncement of imperial might. The flickering light from the coals danced across the faces in the assembled multitude, casting long, distorted shadows that mirrored the dark intentions unfolding before them, while Lawrence himself seemed to transcend the physical agony, his spiritual resilience a defiant counterpoint to the escalating brutality. To understand why this horrifying tableau was conceived and meticulously executed, one must first comprehend the escalating tensions within the Roman Empire during the mid-3rd century. Emperor Valerian, a man burdened by the immense pressures of a vast, sprawling domain under constant external threat and internal strife, sought to consolidate his power and, in his view, restore traditional Roman piety. His perception, shared by many within the Roman establishment, was that the burgeoning Christian communities represented a fundamental challenge to the very fabric of Roman society, undermining its ancient gods, its civic loyalties, and its military effectiveness. Consequently, in the year 257 AD, Valerian unleashed a series of devastating edicts specifically targeting Christians, intensifying persecution that had previously been sporadic and localized. The first edict commanded that all bishops, priests, and deacons must perform sacrifices to the Roman gods, a direct assault on their core beliefs, a demand for apostasy under the threat of banishment or execution. This was quickly followed by a second, far more stringent edict in August 258 AD, which decreed the immediate execution of all Christian clergy, and further stipulated that Christian senators, prominent citizens, and knights were to be stripped of their rank and property, and if they persisted in their faith, also put to death. This was not merely about religious conformity. It was an economic and political purge, aiming to cripple the church's leadership and confiscate its growing wealth, thereby asserting the state's absolute authority and suppressing any independent allegiances. This systemic approach, far from being a spontaneous act of mob violence, was a calculated move by the imperial government to eradicate a perceived existential threat, a deliberate campaign of terror designed to crush dissent and reinforce the imperium's unchallenged dominion over every aspect of its subjects' lives. The very air of Rome, once a symbol of ordered civilization, was now heavy with the shadow of indiscriminate state violence, meticulously planned and ruthlessly implemented, turning the ancient city into a stage for brutal, public displays of control. Within this climate of fear and systematic oppression, the Roman Church, though outwardly clandestine, had grown considerably, accumulating not only a substantial congregation, but also significant material assets. It owned properties, managed extensive charitable operations, and through the alms and donations of its faithful, possessed a considerable treasury. Lawrence, as the archdeacon, occupied a pivotal administrative role within this nascent ecclesiastical structure. He was not merely a spiritual guide, he was the chief financial officer and the principal administrator of the church's charitable endeavors, responsible for the vast network of support that extended to the poor, the widowed, the orphaned, and the sick. His duties included managing the church's possessions, distributing alms, and overseeing the logistical operations that sustained its mission. This position, while vital to the community, also placed him directly in the crosshairs of Valerian's edicts, for he was seen as the gatekeeper of the church's material power, the one who held the keys to its coffers. The Roman authorities, accustomed to measuring power in terms of tangible wealth and land, undoubtedly viewed the church's accumulated resources as a strategic target, believing that by seizing its assets, they could effectively dismantle its influence and eradicate its reach. Lawrence, therefore, was not merely a clergyman. He was a symbolic figure, an embodiment of the church's burgeoning strength and its unwavering commitment to its vulnerable members, a figure whose capture promised access to resources and a profound psychological blow against the Christian community. His very existence, marked by such a position of trust and responsibility, made him a target for a regime intent on dismantling any structure not wholly subservient to its will, thereby making his eventual confrontation with imperial authority not merely inevitable but a calculated, predetermined outcome. The direct predecessor to Lawrence's own brutal end was the summary execution of Pope Sixtus II, the Bishop of Rome, who, along with 4 of his deacons, suffered martyrdom just 4 days prior on August 6th. Sixtus and his companions were apprehended while conducting a clandestine service in the catacombs of Praetextatus, a stark reminder of the desperate measures Christians undertook to practice their faith in an increasingly hostile environment. Their capture was swift, their trial perfunctory, and their sentence immediate decapitation. This swift, uncompromising act of state violence against the head of the Roman Church sent a chilling message throughout the Christian community, signifying that the Valerian persecution was not to be taken lightly. It was a campaign of extermination, relentlessly pursuing its objectives. The execution of Sixtus left Lawrence, as his archdeacon, in a precarious and profoundly dangerous position. He was now the most prominent clerical figure remaining in Rome, and crucially, the last known custodian of the church's material possessions, which the Roman authorities believed to be immense. This was not an isolated incident of religious intolerance. It was a systematic dismantling of leadership, a deliberate act of decapitation designed to leave the body of the faithful leaderless and vulnerable. To grasp the weight of this moment, one must understand that the very foundation of the Christian community, its spiritual guidance and its material sustenance, hung by a slender thread, resting upon the shoulders of a single man. The prefect, sensing the opportunity to deal a final decisive blow to the church's power, turned his full attention to Lawrence, demanding access to the fabled riches that he believed the deacon now controlled, believing that by seizing its material strength, the spirit of the nascent faith would inevitably crumble into dust. Following the execution of Pope Sixtus II, the prefect of Rome, ostensibly acting on the explicit instructions of Emperor Valerian, summoned Lawrence. The demand was stark, unambiguous, and filled with an avarice barely concealed by the veneer of legal authority. Lawrence was to surrender the entire treasury of the church. The Roman authorities, steeped in a culture where temples boasted magnificent gold and silver offerings, and state coffers brimmed with the spoils of conquest and taxation, naturally assumed that the rapidly expanding Christian sect possessed vast, tangible wealth hidden away in secret vaults. They envisioned gleaming chalices, ornate vestments, stacks of precious metals, and perhaps even hoarded Roman currency, all ripe for confiscation to bolster the imperial treasury, which was perpetually strained by incessant warfare and lavish expenditure. Lawrence, facing this formidable demand and the imminent threat of torture and death that accompanied it, reportedly requested a period of 3 days to gather all the church's true riches. This audacious request, granted perhaps out of Roman curiosity or a sense of legalistic procedure, set the stage for a profound act of moral inversion, a challenge not merely to the prefect's authority, but to the very definition of wealth and power held by the Roman state. The prefect, anticipating a magnificent display of material opulence, the surrender of gold and silver that would humiliate the church and enrich the empire, remained utterly unaware of the radical, transformative spectacle Lawrence intended to unveil. Yet something went wrong for the Roman authorities, for Lawrence's understanding of treasure diverged fundamentally from their own, preparing a revelation that would forever redefine the nature of true spiritual wealth. On the designated third day, as the prefect and his retinue gathered, eagerly anticipating the arrival of coffers overflowing with gold and silver, Lawrence presented not material riches, but a throng of individuals, the impoverished, the lame, the blind, the widowed, the orphaned, the sick, and the destitute, all members of the Christian community sustained by the Church's charity. With a quiet dignity that belied the immense danger he faced, Lawrence declared, "These are the treasures of the Church." This was a direct, profound indictment of the Roman values that prioritized material wealth and temporal power above all else. It was an audacious act of defiance, a public renunciation of the imperial definition of value, and a revolutionary assertion of the Church's true mission, the care and spiritual salvation of humanity's most vulnerable. For the Roman prefect, this was not merely a clever rhetorical flourish. It was a deliberate, calculated insult, a contemptuous dismissal of his authority, and a public mockery of the state's avarice. The power words of the empire, centered on conquest, tribute, and physical might, found themselves utterly disarmed by Lawrence's simple yet devastating declaration, which exposed the emptiness of their material pursuits. This moment, a singular act of moral courage, transformed the anticipated confiscation into a powerful theological statement, revealing that the Church's true wealth resided not in gold or silver, but in the human souls it served, the very people whom the empire often disregarded or oppressed. The rage that erupted from the prefect at this stunning revelation was not merely anger at being duped. It was the fury of a powerful man confronted by a truth that shattered his fundamental worldview, a truth delivered by a seemingly powerless man, and this profound outrage sealed Lawrence's fate, guaranteeing a punishment of unparalleled cruelty. The rage of the prefect, ignited by Lawrence's defiant declaration, solidified into a grim resolve for vengeance, an unwavering determination to make an example of the audacious deacon. The subsequent torment inflicted upon Lawrence was designed to be not only excruciatingly painful, but also highly symbolic, mirroring the very heat of his perceived spiritual rebellion. He was stripped, bound, and placed upon an immense iron griddle, positioned over a slow-burning fire, ensuring a prolonged and agonizing death by cremation. The heat would have been immediate, searing the outer layers of his skin, causing blisters to erupt, and slowly cooking his flesh from the extremities inward. The smell of burning human tissue, an unspeakable odor, would have permeated the air, a visceral testament to the state's commitment to brutality. Reports from early Christian accounts, both hagiographic and historical, describe Lawrence's astonishing composure throughout this ordeal, even in the face of such devastating and prolonged pain. They recount that, at one point, he famously quipped to his executioners, "Turn me over, I'm done on this side," or "I am done, turn me over and eat." While the precise phrasing may be embellished by centuries of retelling, the essence of the story remains, a profound, almost supernatural stoicism and wit in the face of unimaginable torment. This was not a passive endurance of suffering, but an active defiance, a final rhetorical thrust against his persecutors, diminishing their power even as his body failed. The very system meant to protect Roman order had become his executioner, transforming a man into a symbol of both profound human suffering and indomitable spiritual resistance. The scene was an unbearable testament to the extreme lengths to which imperial power would go to crush perceived insubordination. Yet Lawrence's inner fortitude, witnessed by the crowd, seemed to defy the physical agony, staining the very ground with his sacrifice. The public spectacle of Lawrence's execution on the griddle was undeniably intended as a chilling deterrent, a vivid, gruesome warning to any who might consider defying imperial authority or clinging to the proscribed Christian faith. Yet, as often happens with such extreme acts of state violence, the desired effect was profoundly inverted. Instead of instilling fear and compliance, Lawrence's unwavering resolve in the face of unimaginable torment, his reported calmness, even his legendary wit, served to inspire awe and solidify belief among the Christian community. Many in the crowd, both Christian and pagan, bore witness to the terrifying scene, and the sheer brutality of it could not be unseen. The raw, visceral horror of a man being slowly roasted alive, enduring such excruciating pain with apparent equanimity, left an indelible impression. It was not justice. It was a warning indeed, but one that backfired spectacularly. The Romans had hoped to extinguish the light of Christianity, but they merely fueled its flame with the very blood of its martyrs. The image of Lawrence, defiant on his fiery bed, became a potent symbol of spiritual triumph over physical oppression, an enduring testament to the power of conviction against overwhelming force. Word of his miraculous composure spread rapidly, recounted in hushed tones and then celebrated in fervent hymns, transforming a planned public humiliation into an accidental apotheosis. This public complicity in horror, the silent witness of the crowds, inadvertently contributed to the moral force of Lawrence's sacrifice, for his steadfastness highlighted the barbarity of the state's actions, drawing a stark line between persecutor and persecuted. His death, far from suppressing the faith, inadvertently paved the way for its enduring resonance and eventual triumph, becoming a central pillar in the burgeoning narrative of Christian martyrdom. Lawrence's brutal martyrdom, far from extinguishing the nascent Christian movement, ignited a fervent wave of devotion that reverberated throughout the Roman Empire and beyond, solidifying his status as one of Christianity's most revered and widely venerated saints. His sacrifice, a public spectacle of agonizing death endured with remarkable fortitude, quickly became a powerful narrative of faith's triumph over tyranny. Churches were consecrated in his name. His story was recounted in sermons and hagiographies, and his feast day, August 10th, became a significant date in the Christian calendar. He became the patron saint of cooks, comedians, and the poor, reflecting both the nature of his death and his steadfast commitment to charity. His enduring legacy was not merely confined to religious veneration. His tale became a powerful symbol of resistance against the oppressive forces of the state, demonstrating that true power resided not in military might or material wealth, but in unyielding moral conviction. The very system that sought to extinguish his influence had inadvertently guaranteed his immortality, etching his name into the annals of history with a force that transcended mere earthly power. The fragility of the Roman Empire's hold on its subjects' consciences was exposed by the unwavering spirit of a single man. His life had never truly been his own in the face of imperial decree, yet his death, paradoxically, secured for him an eternal spiritual autonomy. The paradox of the execution, intended to crush and terrorize, instead solidified his image as a hero, transforming the site of his torment into a sacred space, a pilgrimage destination for those seeking inspiration in the face of their own persecutions. This dramatic reversal of intent underscores the enduring power of martyrdom, to shape collective memory and inspire successive generations to acts of profound courage, reflecting a deep societal yearning for justice that often transcends the immediate realities of power. Lawrence's story is more than a mere historical account of suffering. It is a profound ethical reflection on the nature of power, resistance, and human dignity. His execution, meticulously designed to be the ultimate public display of state control, inadvertently exposed the fundamental weakness of a system that relied on brute force to suppress ideas and beliefs. The Roman Empire, at the zenith of its temporal power, could burn a man's flesh, but it could not extinguish his spirit or the resonance of his message. The violence inflicted upon Lawrence was not simply physical, it was a psychological assault on the community, a blatant act of dehumanization intended to strip individuals of their agency and moral will. Yet Lawrence's response, his defiant humor, his steadfast composure, transformed the spectacle of his martyrdom into a testament to the unyielding strength of human conviction. We must remember that such systematic state violence, driven by fear and the desire for absolute control, is not confined to the annals of ancient history. It manifests in various forms across different eras, targeting marginalized groups, silencing dissent, and attempting to impose uniformity through terror. The public complicity in horror, the silent witnessing of such acts, raises uncomfortable questions about collective responsibility and the moral imperative to challenge injustice. Lawrence's narrative serves as a hauntingly reverent reminder that even in the face of overwhelming brutality, the human spirit, imbued with courage and an unwavering commitment to deeply held values, can achieve a form of immortality, a victory of moral principle over physical subjugation. There is no neat closure to this story, no simple resolution, only a mournful, sobering insight into humanity's capacity for both immense cruelty and extraordinary resilience, an enduring testament to the fragile yet potent power of belief that continues to resonate through the corridors of time. His story is a perpetual warning against the seductive allure of absolute power and its devastating consequences, a call to reflect on the enduring capacity of the individual to confront, and sometimes transcend, the most brutal manifestations of systemic oppression. The details of the event, meticulously recounted by later historians and hagiographers, underscore the deliberate pace of his torment, each agonizing moment intended to serve as a stark lesson. The iron bars of the griddle, heated by the coals beneath, would have conducted the infernal temperature directly into his body, initiating a process of slow, excruciating incineration rather than a swift, merciful end. The smell of burning flesh, sickeningly sweet and acrid, would have hung heavy in the air, a visceral assault on the senses of the gathered onlookers. This was not merely an execution, it was a performance, a ritual of state violence designed to crush the spirit of the nascent Christian movement through the raw, unadulterated display of imperial might. Lawrence, through this unimaginable trial, became a witness not only to his own suffering, but to the profound injustice perpetrated by an empire struggling to maintain its dominion. The sheer brutality of the act speaks volumes about the Roman state's fear of what it perceived as a dangerous, burgeoning threat, reducing a man to a mere example, a gruesome deterrent, a chilling pronouncement of absolute authority. The accounts emphasize his unwavering composure, his almost serene acceptance of the dreadful fate, transforming the intended spectacle of terror into a testament of profound spiritual fortitude. This psychological warfare, enacted through physical dissolution, aimed to break the will of the faithful, but instead it forged an unbreakable legend, solidifying Lawrence's place in the pantheon of those who defied tyranny. His body was consumed, but his spirit, by all accounts, remained unbroken, creating a paradox that would haunt the collective memory of an empire and inspire generations of believers. This harrowing episode forces a contemplation on the nature of sacrifice, not as a willing surrender, but as a forced offering demanded by a merciless system. Lawrence's refusal to yield the Church's true treasures served as an ultimate act of defiance, rebranding a financial demand into a spiritual battle. The narrative of his martyrdom, steeped in the hauntingly reverent accounts of his last moments, underscores a profound moral inversion. The Roman Empire, the supposed bastion of order and justice, revealed its brutal core, its fear overriding any pretense of righteousness. It was not justice, but a warning, a stark display of power intended to break the spirit of an entire movement. Yet, paradoxically, the intense torment inflicted upon Lawrence became the very catalyst for his immortality in the annals of faith and human endurance. His story, recounted across centuries, emphasizes the relentless human struggle against systemic cruelty, a struggle where individual innocence often clashes with an unyielding state apparatus. His defiance, couched in a poignant irony, exposed the ethical vacuum at the heart of the empire's demands. The fragility of power, when it relies on such overt brutality, is vividly illustrated here. For in attempting to obliterate Lawrence, the empire inadvertently solidified his legend, forever linking his memory to the cause of spiritual freedom. This profound narrative serves as a constant reminder that the failure of systems to protect the vulnerable often leads to the elevation of those who suffer under them, transforming victims into symbols of unwavering conviction. The enduring resonance of Lawrence's story lies in its archetypal portrayal of the individual pitted against an overwhelming oppressive system. His character development, though brief in its final public act, reveals a profound internal evolution, shaped by the harsh realities of state-sanctioned persecution. From a diligent administrator, he transitioned into a defiant martyr, his psychological fortitude hardening under the crucible of impending doom. This May's conflict, the vulnerability of one man against the colossal might of the Roman Empire, finds its resolution, not in a narrative closure, but in a legacy of ethical reflection and inspiring witness. His death was not an end, but a beginning for a powerful, enduring symbol. The emotional journey, for those who reflect upon his fate, moves from initial curiosity about such an extreme punishment, through shock at its barbarity, to deep sympathy for the victim, culminating in outrage at the systemic cruelty, and finally, a sobering reflection on the human capacity for both evil and extraordinary resilience. The failure of systems to protect the vulnerable is painfully evident, as state violence against the defenseless becomes the defining characteristic of this historical moment. Lawrence's story is a profound invocation of shared historical memory, urging society to confront the uncomfortable truths about power and its abuses. The motif of a sacrifice is central, but it is a sacrifice imposed, a life violently taken, yet transformed into a beacon of spiritual strength. His final moments, often embellished but always retaining their core message of defiance, echo through time, reminding us that the truest measure of a society is how it treats its most vulnerable, and how individuals respond when confronted by absolute power.